"You're not invited to Thanksgiving," my dad said, light casual like it meant nothing. I froze in my hallway, my keys still in my hand, realizing he wasn't joking. No hesitation, no apology, just cutting me out as easily as deleting a text. But that sentence didn't break me. It woke me up because the minute he hung up, I made a choice that would turn their entire winter upside down, and none of them saw it coming. Before I tell you the rest, tell me, where are you listening from? And when you hear what happened next, what would you have done in my place? My name is Sadie, and for most of my life I thought being the dependable one made me a good daughter. The kind who showed up, the kind who helped, the kind who didn't cause trouble. Maybe that's why I ended up living alone in a small apartment on the outskirts of Minneapolis. Quiet, worn around the edges, but mine. After 10-hour shifts at the distribution center, I'd come home to the soft hum of my old space heater and convince myself that this was enough, warm enough, safe enough. Before I continue the story, tell me first, where did you hear this from? Write it in the comments, because what happens next, most people won't believe. My family lived only an hour away, but the distance between us had stretched for years. Mandy, my younger sister, was always the center of gravity. Every crisis spun around her, every plan adjusted for her moods, every mistake was softened with excuses. She burned through savings on candle projects and creative retreats, but somehow the rest of us were expected to keep her world stable. Dad avoided conflict like it scorched him. If Mandy cried, he folded. If Mandy got stressed, he rearranged holidays plans, even people. Mom just stayed quiet, smoothing over tension with soft apologies that didn't fix anything. And me, I played the role everyone counted on, the fixer who didn't complain. Flashbacks come to me in pieces past Thanksgivings, where I rode the bus home in freezing wind, just to sit at a table that felt warm enough to melt every frustration from the year. Mom's roast chicken, Dad's loud stories about work, Mandy fluttering around showing off her newest hobby. Back then, I used to think those moments meant I belonged, but somewhere between those warm memories and now things shifted. I didn't notice when it happened. Maybe it was the first winter I covered the heating bill because Mom whispered that the house was too cold to sleep in. Maybe it was the next winter when Dad called at midnight saying the furnace was acting up. Or maybe it was all the payments I quietly logged into my own little file payments that added up to almost $8,000 while nobody asked how I was doing or whether I could afford it. They assumed I'd show up. They assumed I'd help. They assumed I'd keep everyone warm through every season of their chaos. I kept telling myself it was love, that this was what good daughters did. But standing in my hallway after Dad's call, the one where he uninvited me from Thanksgiving without a pause, I felt something new settle inside me. Not anger, not sadness, just a sharp, startling clarity. For once, I wasn't the one they could count on without question, and for the first time that realization didn't make me feel guilty. It made me feel awake. The hours after that call felt strangely quiet, like the world was holding its breath with me. I sat on the edge of my bed, still wearing the coat I'd never taken off, replaying Dad's voice in my mind. Casual, effortless, as if excluding me from Thanksgiving was a minor adjustment, not a decision that carved me out of the family picture. Mom texted me that evening, "Maybe it's better this way. Mandy's been anxious, better for who she didn't say, she didn't have to." Every message, every silence, every small justification over the years suddenly lined up with painful clarity. My absence had always been the easiest option. My presence when I wasn't paying for something was optional, disruptive even. I opened my laptop and clicked into the folder I rarely touched unless something was wrong. The payments file glowed on my screen. I scrolled through the list. Heating oil January. Repair. Call March, emergency refill September. Dozens of entries. Month after month of deposits I made without hesitation, sometimes squeezing them between rent and groceries for myself. $8,000, I whispered the number. $8,000 I'd sent to keep a house warm that apparently didn't have room for me anymore. I remembered the night Mom cried on the phone because her hands were too cold to wash dishes. I remember Dad calling past midnight saying the furnace sounded like it was dying. I picked up every time. I absorbed their panic so they wouldn't have to. Meanwhile, Mandy posted selfies in new coats and brunch photos from cafes in the city, always smiling, always cushioned. When she failed at her candle business, nobody raised their voice. Nobody froze her out of Thanksgiving. They wrapped her mistakes in soft words. My mistakes, I wasn't even sure what mine were. Existing, maybe not fitting the vibe. A dull anger simmered under my ribs. Not explosive, not wild, just heavy. A steady warmth that felt dangerously close to self-respect. Dad's sentence echoed again, "You're not invited," And for the first time I didn't shrink, I didn't rush to fix anything, I didn't try to understand Mandy's feelings before my own. Instead, I opened the heating account. The login screen blinked back at me, familiar from every emergency payment I'd made. My cursor hovered over the dashboard where next month's auto payment was already scheduled. All those winters spent choosing their comfort over my own. All those nights I'd come home from a freezing shift only to send money I couldn't spare. Something in me settled solid. Final. I said it out loud just to hear how it sounded. Then don't expect my $8,000. Not shouted, not dramatic, just true. And for the first time in years, the truth felt like enough. I didn't act right away, not out of doubt, but because I wanted to feel the weight of the decision before I made it real. The next morning, Minneapolis was wrapped in a quiet layer of frost. I sat at my small kitchen table, sunlight barely breaking through the thin curtains, and opened my laptop. The heating account login screen looked almost innocent, like it hadn't drained pieces of me for years. I entered my password, the dashboard loaded. There it was, the next auto payment already set for early November, a number I knew by heart. My cursor hovered over the Manage Payments tab. My breath felt slow, steady. All my life I'd been trained to put their comfort before my own, to pour warmth into a house I wasn't welcome in. Unless Mandy approved the weather. But this time the warmth in my apartment was mine, paid by me, controlled by me. I clicked, then clicked again. A final confirmation screen appeared. Cancel automatic payments. For a moment my hand trembled, not from fear, but from the strange feeling of choosing myself. I thought of Dad's voice telling me I wasn't invited. I thought of Mandy's silence. I thought of every winter where I froze on my way to work while sending money to a home where no one saved me. Seat at the table. I hit confirm. The cancellation notice popped up instantly. Just a small line of text, but it felt like a door opening inside my chest. 2 hours later the messages started. Mom, Sadie, something's off with the heating. Can you look at it? I stared at the screen, then set my phone face down. Dad called that evening. Once, twice, 7 times. I let every call ring into silence. By the third voicemail his tone shifted from annoyed to accusatory. Sadie, this is childish. Don't complicate. Things complicate things. No, things were finally simple. The next morning Mandy posted a photo on social media of her feet wrapped in 2 pairs of socks, captioned, "House feels like a freezer, lol." No mention of why, no mention of me, just another performance for the world. Meanwhile, winter moved in early. Weather alerts warned of a coming storm, temperatures dropping faster than expected. Mom texted again, "Your dad says the thermostat isn't responding. Maybe the system glitched." I didn't correct her, not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I had finally stopped lying to myself. I wasn't their endless resource. I wasn't their emergency fund. I wasn't the heat they could steal whenever their world got cold. That night I looked around my apartment, the soft lamplight, the hum of my own heater, the blanket folded neatly at the edge of the couch. Everything small, everything simple, everything mine. And as the first snow of the season hit the window in gentle taps, I realized something I'd never allowed myself to believe. Choosing myself wasn't betrayal, it was survival. Thanksgiving morning arrived like a held breath. Minneapolis was buried under fresh snow, the kind that softens everything except the cold itself. I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, pulling a blanket over my legs, when a sharp knock rattled my front door. Not a polite tap, a demand. I already knew who it was before I stood up. Dad. Through the peephole, I saw him standing in the hallway, bundled in an old coat that looked thinner than the frost sitting on his shoulders. His cheeks were red from the wind, and he kept shifting his weight like the cold had settled into his bones. I cracked the door open just enough to see him. "Sadie." He breathed out the word, forming a faint cloud in the chilled hallway. "We need to talk." I didn't step aside. About what? His jaw tightened, not used to being questioned. "Don't play games. The heating at the house, it's barely working. Your mother hasn't slept in 2 nights. Mandy's upstairs crying. The place feels like it's 40 degrees. I kept my expression calm. "That sounds hard. He blinked, disbelief flickering across his face. "You canceled the payments. Why would you do that?" For the first time in years, he looked small in front of me, vulnerable. But that vulnerability didn't feel like an invitation. It felt like a last-minute realization of consequences he never imagined would land on him. "I didn't cancel the heating," I said evenly. "I cancelled my part in it." Dad stared at me as if I'd spoken a foreign language. "You've always helped," he said. "You know we count on you." "I know," I replied. "But you also told me I wasn't invited." "Remember that part?" His face flushed, not from the cold this time. It was just one holiday. "Sadie, Mandy's been anxious. We didn't want drama." I let out a slow breath. "You cut me out to keep her comfortable. But you still expected the money." Do you see how that sounds? Dad's voice cracked in frustration. This isn't about money, it always was, I whispered, just not for you. He scratched the back of his head, a nervous gesture I remembered from my childhood. Look, maybe I shouldn't have said it like that, but you know how your sister gets. You're the steady one, you don't take things personally. I pulled the door a little closer to me. I'm not the steady one, I said softly, I'm the convenient one. He opened his mouth but nothing came out. When you uninvited me, I continued, you made it clear I wasn't part of the family when it wasn't beneficial. So now I'm just matching the energy. Dad finally exhaled a shaky, defeated sound. We have no money, Sadie. None. I had to sell your grandfather's old watch set just to buy 1 drum of heating oil. That won't last the week. The mention of Grandpa's watches hit me like a soft punch. Those were treasures he'd polished every Sunday. But even that pain didn't outweigh what I needed to do. I'm sorry you're struggling, I said truthfully. I really am. But you made your choice, Sadie. His voice collapsed into a plea. Please, your mom is sick, she can't stay in a cold house. Something inside me wavered just a little. Mom wasn't the one who chose to exclude me, but she also didn't stop it. I tightened my grip on the door. I hope she gets better, I said. But I'm not stepping back into the same role, not this winter, not ever. Dad swallowed hard, eyes narrowing as if the cold itself strung more because of me. You're punishing us. No, I said gently, I'm finally stopping the punishment I've put on myself. Before he could respond, I closed the door. The latch clicking shut sounded like a decade of weight falling off my shoulders. But the climax wasn't over, not even close. 4 days later, the snowstorm arrived in full force. Strong winds hammered the building and the temperature outside dropped to single digits. I wrapped myself in a blanket on the couch, listening to the whistle of wind through the old window frame. Another knock came late in the evening. Softer, slower, almost apologetic. I opened the door halfway and saw my mother. She stood under the flickering hallway light, hair dusted with melting snow, scarf pulled tight around her neck. Her eyes were tired, more tired than I'd ever seen. Hi, sweetheart, she said, voice trembling. I'm sorry to just show up. I stepped back slightly, letting the warm air touch her face but still blocking the entrance. How did you get here? I took the bus, she said then. Walked, she hesitated, rubbing her gloved hands together. Your father wouldn't come again, he said it's no use. I didn't answer, I let her speak. I've been thinking, she said, her voice cracking, about everything about you, about the way we depended on you without really seeing you. Her gaze lifted to mine, and for the first time in a long time she didn't look away. I should have stood up for you. I should have told your sister no. I should have told your father he was wrong, and I'm sorry. Apology was soft, but it landed hard. Not manipulative, not rushed, just honest. She swallowed. I'm not here to ask for money, she whispered. I'm here to ask for forgiveness, even if you can't give it yet. My throat tightened, not with anger. With grief, for the years lost, for the moments that could have been different. I'm not angry anymore, I said. But I can't go back to being the one who holds everyone else up. Her shoulders dropped, relief mixed with sadness. I understand, we stood there for a long moment, quiet, except for the wind behind her and the heater humming behind me. Finally, she stepped back. I just needed you to know I love you, she said, even if I didn't show it well, as she walked down the hallway, her small figure fading into the echo of the storm. I closed the door gently. No slam, no rage, just a quiet ending to a chapter that had been breaking me for years. And for the first time in my life, the warmth behind that door belonged entirely to me. Winter settled deep across Minnesota, but for the first time in years I didn't feel swallowed by it. The messages from my family eventually stopped. Dad found a weekly rape motel outside town. Mandy bounced between couches until even her closest friends grew tired of the drama. The old house went up for sale, cold, dim, and finally too heavy for anyone to carry. Meanwhile, my life grew quieter in the best way. I read more, slept better, saved money I used to send without thinking. Haley called, sometimes giving me small updates, but I no longer felt pulled back into the old storm. Mom never asked for anything again. She just sent one short message weeks later. I'm working on myself. Thank you for being honest. And strangely, that was enough. I used to think family meant bending until something inside you snapped. Now I know real love doesn't demand you freeze so others stay warm. It took one uninvitation, one moment of clarity to finally redraw the lines I should have drawn years ago. And yes, there's sadness in the distance that followed, but there's also peace, the kind that comes from choosing yourself without apology. If you've ever carried more than your share or been pushed aside by the people who should have held you close, you're not alone. Tell me where you're listening from and what part of this story hit you the hardest. If you enjoyed the story, hit like, drop a comment and subscribe for the next chapter.